progress.
Yes.
Vice Chair Matt Schuler.
Here.
Debbie Dean.
Here.
Alder Kathy Hengfetz.
Here.
Is here. Melanie Palmer is excused, and Steve Strubus.
Here.
Fantastic. Motion to approve the agenda, please.
Make a motion.
Second.
Second by Debbie. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Minutes from June 11th.
Motion approved.
Steve,
Second.
Matt, all those in favor of the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Thank you. Regular business, consideration of possible action to grant NeighborWorks Green Bay a 30-day extension. And that's Cheryl.
That's me. So this is the property that we own, which is adjacent to Golden House. And we've been working with NeighborWorks for a while on this. It's, we've gone through a couple of different iterations on how we wanted to do the building, and finally came to the determination that we were going to actually look at two separate buildings, 16 units, 8 each side. This is a partnership project, of course, with Golden House as well. They're going to supply us, and it's not part of that. Sad news, went out for bid, and unfortunately the bids came in super high.
Wow.
And there was one bid on the project. So
One
The bid.
the bid came in super high.
Wow.
Higher than what we expected, I guess, for this project. So really what we're looking at doing is taking the next 30 days to either looking at value engineering, possibly going out for rebid, trying to consider what we could do to still make this project work. It's an important project. We'd like to get it done, but we also know that we're probably at a point, just in speaking with NeighborWorks staff, that we're at a point where if we can't make it work, we can't make it work. So, but we still need a little bit of time to
Isn't that
figure it
strange to
out.
have only one bid? Is that because everybody's so busy?
So, I know there've been issues with getting bids, actual construction bids on
Right,
projects,
right.
right? So, Noel is here from NeighborWorks,
Yeah.
so it's David Erickson, if you want to open the floor.
Yeah. Motion to open the floor, please. Sure. Steve?
Second.
What, Kathy? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Noel, please.
Sure, and David Erickson, our Director of Real Estate Development, can certainly add other comments, but, one of the things that happened, we went out for multiple bids. We only received one bid. It was significantly higher than what our pro forma indicated, and one of the other bidders, declined to submit and said, however, if you're willing to wait a year and a half, we give you some numbers. And so it was just everybody's
Yeah.
busy, that at least the ones that, we were able to get some attention from, and I think we're reflecting, the numbers are reflecting how busy things are for some of these builders, and we didn't get what we were hoping for. And as Cheryl mentioned, we're either going to value engineer or do some other work and see if we can find a path forward for this site, during this extension. I guess 30 days is a little lean. I appreciate the staff's urgency in this. We prefer 60 days, but it's just the nature of the beast. And it's certainly at a point where we've got to either figure out a path forward, or we've got to say we're not able to do it at this time, and staff will look at other options, I
That'd be a
guess.
shame.
David, I don't know if you've got any other comments.
No, you covered it pretty well now, thank you. And just from not trying to blow anything here while we're in a public session about your negotiating rights, so, consider that as your answer. What are you off? Like, what's the gap? Are you talking 5%, 40%, or 100%?
We're off by about 25%.
Okay.
So,
30 days, you'd like to have 60? You go with 30, then huh?
It's the decision of the RDA.
Okay.
To do that.
Absolutely.
I mean, we're at a point where we realize
Yep.
that if we can't make this work, because it's been a year, that
Yep.
we would basically need to go back out to RFP.
Okay,
bids,
great, good
with the
point.
same partners, but
Excellent point.
that decision's up to you guys.
Do you think that you will get additional bids if you go back up? Can't really say, right? Crapshoot. Okay.
I can't answer that.
Right.
Answer me.
I've been there, I understand the urgency of it. 30 days, not very much time to get that done. I would be open to
60.
60. unless there's something that I don't understand.
How about 30 with an option for that we do in R30? I mean, at least to have some urgency. With
I don't want to undo the investment everybody's made in this
Mhm.
effort to date. There's a lot of, I'm sure a
Right.
lot of resources have been piled into that, and I don't want to sell it
Yeah.
short, just,
Right. I don't think people usually understand just how much the pre-development costs are on trying to get a project in the ground. And, you know, I do understand what you're saying, Gary, but it's like, but do we want to say 60, so somebody that's a little backed up might think, oh, I don't think I can do it in 30, but I could probably do it within that 60, you know?
Any other questions for Noel, our project manager?
It is somewhere.
No, is any of this building kind of seasonal? Like, right now, I would
That's right.
assume all the builders are extremely busy getting a lot of work done.
Right.
Is it easy to get bids at this time?
I'll defer to David on that one.
No, it's not easy to get bids. And based on the outcome of this one where we put it up to 4 local bidders and we only got 1 back, that was kind of disheartening. So, but we are running into that with other smaller scale projects as well.
Okay, so is it better to do it in the fall, so they're ready for spring, or it doesn't really matter? I'm just curious.
No, that's a good question, and we've had bidding operations for other projects like the one over on 4th Street that happened over the winter and early spring. And we struggled with the same performance issues.
Yeah, I'm just hearing there's a lot of work out there and people are really busy, which,
There is a lot of work.
that
a lot
gets
happening.
scary, you know?
I think one of our concerns for timeline as well, too, is the fact that we have some funding sources that have deadlines on them. So, that being said, you know, if we can get this deal done with NeighborWorks, great, that saves us a lot of time, but like our ARPA dollars and some other dollars have these timelines on them.
And when is the end of that timeline?
Obligation at the end of 25,
Okay,
spent by the end of 26 for ARPA.
okay.
So,
Any other questions for NeighborWorks? Steve,
I
please.
do.
hold on, please,
Right.
I don't.
Is there any partnership that can be made that might help another organization? Or not?
Unless somebody's got a crew.
Unless somebody's got a crew.
I think that's one of the
That
things.
works
is
for free.
People working, right, is, you know, on this stuff. That's I think what we're seeing is there's just everybody who's swinging hammers and cutting boards and they're doing that right now. And shoehorning this in is a challenge. You know, and it's got us thinking outside the box. The 4th Street project we brought to you recently, you know, that found a feasible path because we, you know, kind of coaxed somebody out of retirement to help us lead that project. And so, you know, this window, if you give us the extension, is not going to be a conventional, oh, let's just talk to 2 more bidders. This is going to be twisting arms and cajoling partners and trying to find somebody who will give us some love on being able to do this thing in a reasonable timetable and not, you know, 2 years from now.
The project itself, as we see it, disregarding that we can't get a contractor, are you excited about the project? You like the design, the layout, that project right there?
You know, I think, me personally, I'm always open to exploring, you know, design. I think 16 units is a good number of units for that site. And this could work really well, I think, on that location. The plans could work elsewhere as well. And the prospect of a partnership, you know, with Golden House is something we've been discussing as well. There's nothing formal at this point,
Right,
but,
right.
you know, some of these units being transitional housing for folks leaving that shelter, you know, those are all kind of exciting possibilities of partnership for us, but they don't bring us builders at this point.
Right.
right.
I was just
Go ahead,
thinking
Kathy.
of the new cap.
I'm sorry?
I was just thinking of the new cap. I mean, I know that they have some construction abilities, but I'm sure it's nowhere near the construction abilities you're looking for.
Any other question for NeighborWorks?
We do have some design, some facade stuff I think we want to work with you on as well too, just the stuff facing the university and some changes. that might save some money, but, yeah.
I'm motioning it back to regular business.
So moved.
Second.
Matt, Steve, whatever. Any questions or comments regarding the motion? If not, all those in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, good, we're back to regular business. Thank you, thanks, Noel. So what does the group desire?
Can we unpack this ARPA funding and end of '25 and RFP and the timeline piece of it a little bit? And just, is there any reason those things can't start happening with or without this extension? Let me see if I can phrase that differently. If this parcel has to go out to RFP for developers, and you're concerned about getting that done in a timely manner for the ARPA funding, is it that can't be put in motion with the 60 days extension, or it can't be put in motion while an extension is out there?
I don't know why we would do an RFP if we had somebody online, actively working on the site,
Totally.
committed to the site.
Totally understood it. I'm
Yeah,
just-
that would be it, that'd be more of a,
Yeah.
it seems like we would not do that. We don't do that routinely.
Okay.
We don't do that ever.
You know what I'm saying, we get to 61 days and it went sour and then you start, or we get to 61 days and
Well,
it
right,
goes in
we
the
would-
garbage and we're thrilled,
Like
right?
60, right, day 61, we could be prepared to do an RFP,
Right.
if that's the road we want to go, but yeah.
And do we only discuss this in 30-day increments, or could we meet in the middle and say something like 45?
You as the RDA can choose whatever you like to do. We have been hearing from you as the RDA
Yes.
that some of these extensions have been going on a long time.
Yeah.
And this one has been out there for a year now.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I think trying to, the numbers came in, we couldn't get it, we tried to get it to this meeting actually, but we thought, well, what the heck, well, if we can do another 30 days, then maybe we can work the numbers out, figure things out. You heard Noel say that 60 would be better, but that's kind of where our heads are at, is that the sensitivity and the time for some of the
Yeah.
options that are completed.
Yeah.
I think they're splitting difference.
Okay. I think it seems reasonable, I don't, yeah, so I believe I would be making a motion to offer a 45-day extension.
Okay.
Second.
Motion by Steve, second by Matt. Any questions or comments regarding the motion? If not, all those in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thanks again, Noel.
Thank you.
Number 2, consideration of possible action to approve Burlington Associates and Community Development to proceed with phase 2 of the Community Land Trust feasibility study.
So we will.
Will, I'm sorry, Will.
Yep, thank you. All right, so back in February, the Redevelopment Authority authorized staff to engage our consultant, Jeffrey Washburn, with Burlington Associates and Community Developments to explore the feasibility of implementing a community land trust for the city. This would be a first of its kind for our community. This process was broken up into 2 phases, where the first phase was really to go out in the community, meet with stakeholders, look at the market, and just see if this is a tool that would be supported by the community. Our consultant, Jeffrey Washburn, is here on the line and would like to present his findings from the phase 1 of this feasibility study, and then get into discussing what phase 2 looks like. So with that, I would recommend opening up the floor.
Yeah, motion to open the floor.
So moved.
Debbie, Matt,
I'll
all
second.
those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Jeff?
Jeffrey.
Yep, there you are.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good
Thank you for the
afternoon.
opportunity to present. Will, does it make sense to, should I be sharing my screen or?
You can share your screen.
All right. Thank you again for the time this afternoon. I've been requested to hopefully get through these 19 slides in 15 minutes. So I'm going to speak quickly, but I'm hopeful that there will be questions and that I'll be able to answer those either during or following the presentation. Again, my name is Jeff Washburn, consultant with Burlington Associates in Community Development. national consulting firm that's been doing community land trust consulting for over 40 years now. I only recently joined about a year ago, Burlington Associates, but prior to that, served as the first staff person as well as executive director for the City of Lakes Community Land Trust in Minneapolis for almost 21 years. So I'd like to think I bring a lot of kind of just land trust experience into this space. But today, what I'd like to do is take the first several slides just to provide an overview of how a community land trust works, make sure everybody's on the same page, and then probably the second half of the slides are going to speak to what I've heard from your community and some recommendations moving forward, as well as I'd like to think a strong case for why there should ultimately be a community land trust in Green Bay, which we'll get to. So, sorry about that. So, context, first community land trust was actually started back in the 60s through the civil rights movement. There was a number of black farmers who were being discriminated against on multiple levels, were able to find funding, and they purchased land not only for an agricultural purpose, but their long-term goal was to build out and create a community land trust for housing. Ultimately, through continued discrimination, they lost that land. There's a great story behind it. They've gotten that back, but that's the roots of the community land trust here in the United States. Currently, there are over 350 active community land trusts nationally. And in Wisconsin, there are 4 land trusts with at least one home in trust. And I'm guessing there's probably about 120 to 140 homes in trust across the state. I've been fortunate, about every other month, I've been able to sit in on the Wisconsin State Network, CLT, the monthly meetings. And I've just been really blown away by the energy and the growth in community land trust over just the last year in Wisconsin. So I felt that was really important, that the work that you all are looking at is not in a vacuum, that there's a bunch of energy around community land trust at this point in time across the state of Wisconsin. Community land trusts. So they typically are structured around affordable home ownership. I think on either coast and in expensive markets, home ownership is out of reach for many communities, and increasingly we're starting to see land trusts being used for rental applications as well. They typically end up as a nonprofit organization, and in most cases the land trust, and we'll get to this, after they assist somebody in the home ownership, the land trust retains the ownership of the land, and the homeowner takes title to the structure, the building, or the improvements. And that relationship is bound by usually a 99-year ground lease. In Wisconsin, it's a 98-year term. And really key to community land trust, and I think that really helps with the credibility and transparency of the organization, is that most land trusts are structured with a tripartite board, where at least 1/3 of the board is represented by the household served by the organization. And most community land trusts are also membership-based organizations, where that membership, which includes all the households served, plus other folks in the community that subscribe and believe in the mission of the organization, elect that board of directors, and also serve as protection to the long-term affordability of the property, in that if the organization ever wanted to sell land, change its bylaws, change that ground lease document, it would require a majority of the membership, not just the board, to allow any of those things to happen. So building in some additional community protections for the community land trust. So my 60-second elevator pitch here that I learned over the years, essentially what community land trusts do is bridge the difference between what a household can get a mortgage for and the cost of that property. Usually that investment from the land trust ranges somewhere between 20 to 50% of the overall value of the property, including the land. That figure is increasing with the increase that we're seeing across the nation in housing costs. That affordability investment is tied to the land. It doesn't necessarily equate to the value of the land. I think one of the misconceptions of community land trust is that land trusts take the cost of the land out of the deal. They take the cost out of the land of the deal, but in addition to that, also are providing a pretty substantial investment to help bridge that gap that we talked about. Utilizing the ground lease to maintain that relationship with the homeowner and the relationship with the community land trust. If it is a condo situation, typically a deed restriction is used. And all of this is tied to the understanding that if and when that household ever decides to sell, they agreed to sell to another income qualified household, and they agreed to resale restrictions. So what are those resale restrictions? There are two kind of predominant resale formulas that are used across the United States. For whatever reason, in Minnesota, every land trust, 14 land trusts in the state, all use an appraisal-based resale formula. So I'm just going to quickly show this example. Let's assume that there's a home in Green Bay or a property that's worth $350,000 and a buyer can only get a $220,000 mortgage. The land trust comes in with a $130,000 grant that's tied to the title of the land. The homeowner lives in the home as long as they want, making mortgage payments on that $220,000 mortgage. But if and when they decide to sell, in this case 10 years later, assume that the value went up $100,000 in value, they will receive all the principal they paid down on their mortgage. They received any sort of down payment assistance that was forgiven, that would be theirs as well. They came in with a down payment, that would also be theirs. And in the case here, using a 25% appraisal-based resale formula as an example, they would receive 25% or $25,000 of that $100,000 increase in value, which means that the next buyer is going to purchase that property. Income qualified household will purchase it for $245,000. The way we get there is starting with that new appraised value of $450,000, less the $130,000 we invested in that first household, less 75% of that $100,000 increase. So what land trusts do is take that one-time, typically public investment, but not necessarily investment, and make sure that it can benefit multiple generations of households without having to add additional gap or subsidy down the road. So it's a way to ride essentially that market appreciation to keep a home permanently affordable for a community. The next example here, and so what happens, all the land trusts that are starting up or established in Wisconsin at this point in time are all utilizing a fixed rate resale formula approach, which is a little simpler to explain. We'll start with the same scenario with $350,000 property, and we'll assume that it went up $100,000 in value here as well. But with a fixed rate resale formula, the homeowner is quite simply going to receive 2% of their purchase price, or the land trust purchase price, so 2% of that $220,000 for every year they live in the home. So in this case, when they go to sell, they're going to receive $44,000 plus whatever they pay down on the principal and any down payment assistance, meaning that that next buyer is going to purchase the property for $276,000. And that's how we get to that price point. Two different methodologies, both trying to get at taking a one-time investment and ensuring that it can work to keep homes affordable and keep the home affordable for another income qualified household. Land trust can be used in a whole bunch of different ways. I think a lot of times people assume that they can only be used with new construction or maybe acquisition rehab. In my experience in Minneapolis, we use the community land trust for all these different applications. So new construction, acquisition, rehab. Our biggest program was a buyer-driven program. So instead of us deciding which home under the land trust, we'd go out and raise the funds, and then buyers with the realtor would use our investment to help leverage a purchase out in the market. So it's a way to let buyers go out and choose a home of their choice anywhere in the city of Green Bay. In our case, buyers could purchase a single-family home or a duplex through that buyer-driven program, and they were the ones selecting that home. But once in the land trust, that home would stay permanently affordable. And then our organization also was able to assist, by the time I left, over 20 households, existing very low-income homeowners who were facing potential loss of home due to foreclosure or tax forfeiture. We would step in, solve the debt problem in exchange for taking essentially an equity stake in the property. Households were able to stay in their home. We were able to take care of some deferred maintenance and rehab in the home. But at that point in time, the home would then become part of the land trust. So not just helping first-time buyers get into homes, but helping vulnerable existing homeowners who might be at risk of losing their homes make their home part of the land trust. So there's a lot of creative approaches that I think the land trust can bring to a community, depending on what the needs are. Most land trusts, this is probably common practice across the United States by and large, there's going to be some sort of an income limit that will be established by the community. There's always going to be some sort of a land trust orientation to make sure buyers understand how the land trust works. We require first-time homebuyer education training, using some sort of an application process to assure the household earns less than whatever the income limit is. A pre-approval from a lender that's able to do a land trust mortgage loan. And then really strong practice, and the majority of land trusts require this, that buyers, prior to going to closing, sit down and meet with an attorney of their choice and review all the land trust documents so they have independent counsel of the terms and conditions related to the community land trust. And in most cases, the community land trust pays for that, even though the land trust is not being represented. And then common questions, I'm just going to breeze through these and assume that maybe some questions will come from the committee on these, but oftentimes there's questions about, all right, Jeff, what happens in a depreciating market? What happens in the event of a foreclosure? What happens if somebody makes a major capital improvement to their home and they refinance or take out a home equity loan? Can I leave my home to my heirs? What happens with property taxes? There's a layer with down payment assistance, and then talk through some of the additional fund requirements and those kinds of things if there are questions about them later. So transitioning now, kind of the case for, at least I'd like to think a strong case for a community land trust in Green Bay is, I dug through, and this is by no means scientific. I had to extrapolate some numbers from Brown County, but I did find a bunch of different data points for the city of Green Bay proper. But this is looking backwards over 30 years, looking at what the median household income is in the city of Green Bay, what the median home value was for each of those years, and then what the interest rate was during each of those years as well on average. And what you can see from this table is that historically speaking, and I heard this time and time again in the conversations I had with stakeholders in Green Bay, is that Green Bay has been a relatively affordable place for people for the last 30 plus years. And if you'll notice the negative numbers there indicate years where a median income household did not require any sort of gap to be able to buy a median priced home in the community, meaning that they were able to buy more median priced home than maybe they would have otherwise during those markets. In the instances where there's a positive number, in theory, again, there's bunches of different types of homes available for purchase, but in those years, on average, a median income household would need to probably come up with some additional monies if they were going to try and buy a median priced home in the market during that point in time. So, historically speaking, Green Bay has been a very affordable place, relatively speaking, to be able to purchase a home. You'll note in 2022 and 2023, that number starts to creep up. In 2023, the number got larger than it had ever been in the last 30 years as it relates to the gap that would be needed for a median income household to be able to purchase a median priced home. So I took, she's back up here, looking across that bottom line, if you average out the percent change over years, we had 2.7% increases in incomes, 4.1% in home value increases or property value increases, and an average mortgage interest rate of 6.05%. So again, not scientific here, but I think it starts to illustrate where the market potentially is going here, is that if we look forward over the next 25 years and we maintain that average, and we all know that incomes and the home value is going to fluctuate a lot more than this, but on average, what we start to see is on that very far right column, significant increases in the gap that are going to be required for a median income household to be able to buy a median priced home in Green Bay. Now again, these numbers, if I knew this information, I'd be making a lot more money in understanding where markets are going, and anything can happen. But I think it starts to illustrate where things are going. And this doesn't get to what we as a community need to do to serve a household at 80% of median income or 60% of median income. This is helping a household at 100% of median income. What kind of gap would be needed for them to be able to purchase a home in the community? And again, I could easily be argued out of any of these numbers, but I think they're pretty solid, and I think it starts to build the case for why, if we don't do something today, it's going to only get worse for our community. Illustrating those two graphs here those two tables and these two graphs, you'll see, historically, those blue and green lines line up for a good chunk of Green Bay's history, and they start to separate moving forward. And the separation is in hundreds of thousands of dollars, as you can see. Again, just another way of illustrating the previous two tables. So big picture observations and maybe learnings for me, or things that I heard from stakeholder conversation, is that the city of Green Bay and you all are doing an amazing job as it relates to affordable housing in relative kind of investments and intentionality in the city of Green Bay. There's a lot of intentionality on homelessness and very low income households. And I think per the previous graphs that you all are just now coming into really wrestling with affordability challenges that you've really been fortunate not to have to wrestle with in the past. And so that's bringing on, I think, a lot of really interesting thoughts and concerns about where Green Bay is today and where potentially it's going to be as it relates to a place where we thought everybody could buy a home if they chose to at some point in time. Overwhelming support, bottom line, overwhelming support from everybody that I spoke to. There were some conversations where folks weren't necessarily understanding how the community land trust works. And after I explained how it worked, all of those folks, I think, were overwhelmingly in support, saying this is something that would make a lot of sense for Green Bay. While we focused the conversations on affordable home ownership, there certainly were also quite a few nods and questions as it related to affordable renting as well. This is just a list of the stakeholder conversations that I've had thus far. The two that are bolded and italicized, I'm still having this week, so I will have more input. But again, based on the conversations I've had thus far, I think that there's going to be a lot of alignment in those responses as well. So the geography, what came out of the recommendations overwhelmingly was that there should initially be a focus on the city of Green Bay with future impact down the road across Brown County with the potential for growth contingent on local support or support from the county as itself. Several stakeholders suggested that, down the road maybe even makes sense to expand beyond Brown County, but I didn't hear from anyone that they felt like we needed to start with this larger regional community land trust right out of the gate. Focus, prove out the model, and then start to build it out, recognizing that there's a lot of people in the community who live in one community and work in another and do a lot of commuting, and that people think of Green Bay as a larger region, whether the city likes that or not, but that's kind of the way a lot of folks think about the little community there. Operations, most stakeholders suggested the community land trust best be operated by a nonprofit entity. That stated, there was a nod that you all have your fair share of nonprofits in your community and be really sensitive to how that plays out and takes place. Almost every stakeholder named NeighborWorks Green Bay and Habitat for Humanity as likely entities to take on a community land trust program initially, with Green Bay, with NeighborWorks Green Bay probably edging out as the primary recommended entity as related to those stakeholder conversations. There were a few comments really kind of coming out of concern that maybe we shouldn't pick and choose which nonprofit would or wouldn't operate a community land trust, but those were a minority of the comments, but I at least wanted to acknowledge that there were some folks that maybe thought a new nonprofit would make some sense. And if NeighborWorks Green Bay, there's a strong recommendation that leadership on an advisory committee make sure to have representatives from Habitat and organizations with a strong cultural and or race affiliation. Impact, it really depended on who I was talking to. I spoke to a number of folks who really were focused on that very low income, supportive housing type of entity or clientele, and they definitely skewed toward circa 50% or below AMI as a way to help folks who are really in the very low income strata to move forward. But there were quite a few folks that recognized that based on those tables that I shared, that there's slippage and that median income household today just isn't able to break into the market anymore. And so I think there is a decision that needs to be made I don't think that it has to be an either-or scenario, but I do recommend that there be a priority established at some point in time that really identifies who the community land trust is looking to serve. Doesn't mean they can't serve other folks, but prioritizing where they want to be focusing those resources. If you only had $1, where should that dollar go, kind of question. And then lastly, I've said this a few times, but I think real strong recommendation that the city of Green Bay should move forward with starting a community land trust. Initially as a program with NeighborWorks Green Bay, with the potential that one day maybe spins off and becomes its own entity. But really focus on getting it up and proving out the model with an organization that has some capacity. These are, I think, starting to skew into my own recommendations moving into the next phase of this work, assuming that you all want to move forward with the community land trust. It takes money in those early years to support the operations of a community land trust. So you start bringing the trust, and the numbers start to work a lot better. And I think a lot of nonprofits function that way. But there are earned revenue opportunities that start to build into the organization that help take the pressure off of grant funding of an organization like this. Capital. So those dollars that go in for either affordability gap or development gap, value gap on a home are critical. That even if an organization has operational capacity for the next 10 years, if they don't have the gap, that difference between what a buyer can mortgage, what the cost of the property, it's going to really stifle growth. And so you all have a real strong culture of philanthropic and individual giving in Green Bay. I think for community land trust to be successful, and I'm seeing this across the United States, the land trust and or the states that have successful land trusts are the ones where there's public sector funding coming in at multiple levels of government, including the state. And so I say that recognizing that there's work that needs to be done at the state level in Wisconsin, and not back to those comments about the coalition there in Green Bay, in Wisconsin, working with community land trust, really trying to figure out ways that dollars can be made available for community land trust statewide. And hence another reason why I think now is a really good time in your community. And then just programmatic approaches, especially in Green Bay where there isn't a bunch of open vacant land parcels, an acquisition rehab approach, a seller leverage approach where, people in the community perhaps willing to sell their home at a discount to the community land trust, which helps get down the road as it relates to having sufficient gap to make those homes affordable. And then partnerships. Strongly aligning with those developers in town, both non and for-profit developers, and working on policies that would support long-term affordability. Now, I realize all this takes time, and it takes a while to evolve, but I think to be successful and to really get at some level of scale in the community, we're no longer at the luxury we can just pull one lever and hope that works. We've got to be pulling more than just one lever, and in many cases, we have to pull all the levers because the gaps are getting so big. I appreciate you all bearing with me on those 19 slides, and guess I'll stop there and hope that there's some questions for me.
Okay, Debbie, you've always been heavily involved in housing. I want to hear your impression of this presentation and this concept.
Well, first of all, Burlington has always been like the go-to for community land trusts for years and years and years. And I actually was cleaning out my basement and I just found a big thing on community land trusts. All my files. They don't smell very good. But yeah, I mean, the thing is the gap. And really, if anything, that I would like it to be focused towards, it would be between the 80 and 120, because you have habitat that can serve the other lower population, but that 80 to 120 is continually going to be having a really hard time being able to get in. Plus, you might find, I think the demographics looking for homes might better understand the community land trust now, formulated in their heads than prior, because they're more willing to look at different types of homeownership, I think, you know, because they're gonna be having to. They're not gonna have a choice. So, I think I think a very, very important piece of this is that we have to try to leverage legislation, especially down at WIDA, to be able to go to the state, to be able to get some funding for this, because the state's not doing their job on that. So, that's my 2 cents.
Fundamentally, there was a phase 1 approved previously.
Yep.
This
Yep.
recommendation is to continue this study into what we're calling phase 2. right?
Yes.
This is the result of phase one right here.
It's more than the study, it's actually, this was the study. Green Bay overall, the community is in support of seeing a community land trust. Phase 2 is looking at setting up the structure, the governance portion of what that would look like, discussions about what properties could go into trust to kickstart this, looking at building that first home, scalability. So really looking at, okay, there's an appetite for this, how are we going to get this to work now?
So this is the completion of phase 1, basically, Steve.
Right.
Background, please?
Yeah, a couple questions. Will, you, could be Jeffrey. And I get Burlington is in the business of helping people set up CLTs, so I would expect them to be very supportive of the concept. What do the detractors to CLTs say? And I know there's gotta be detractors.
Yeah, Jeff probably got some comments on
So,
that, in regards to the report.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, and you don't own the land. This is considered second-rate home ownership, especially in communities where I think there's a real intentionality these days at looking at the home ownership gaps, racial home ownership gaps. I hear in many communities, hey, we're now coming up with opportunities for home ownership and it's going to be subject to these resale formulas. That doesn't seem fair. So I think there are definite concerns. Taking my Burlington associates hat off, though, I feel really comfortable coming into the community and saying, all right, so what's the answer? Are we okay with saying home ownership is no longer an opportunity for a good chunk of our population? I have several slides that speak to the different types of investments. We can make forgivable down payment assistance loans. We can even recapture down payment assistance loans. But if we even subscribe or believe that those percentages of 2.7% income compared to 4.1% home value increases are going to hold somewhat true over the long term, then what is the answer for coming up with more and more money every time somebody's looking to buy a home? And I hope there's a better solution that comes around, but at this point in time, it feels like a shared equity approach makes a lot of sense for communities that still want to create some opportunities for home ownership in their community.
I don't know massive vested interest, but I'm more interested in your opinion of the concept.
Sure.
Because
Yeah, and to address that question, I think, for the buyer that can compete in the market to purchase a home, community land trust isn't for them. This is for that buyer that would otherwise be a renter for the rest of their lives. And so this mechanism allows a community to subsidize one house, one time, generally, to allow a family to get in there. And then over time, they still build equity. They don't necessarily build it as fast as somebody buying conventionally in the market would and being able to sell at whatever the current appreciated value is. But they still get something. And then if they do sell or relocate or something else changes in their lives, they've got a more substantial downstroke on their purchase of a market home. And when I look at, for example, the 460-some dwelling units that NeighborWorks Green Bay, for example, has developed over the decades, you look at those and there was sometimes there's a significant community investment in those homes. And the buyer of that home gets to realize all of that when they sell. And sometimes they sell, sooner than we'd like. But we haven't seen, but we've seen a lot of our families, purchase that home and stay there for a long time. But this is a way to make sure that when you do that investment, I mean, you know, in some of the projects we've been bringing forward recently have been like a two-tiered thing, right? We're asking for some construction gap, and we're also asking for down payment assistance to make that possible. In these sorts of trusts, you get to keep that investment and that construction gap working, not just for that family, but for subsequent families that own that home. And that's really, you know, in a lot of ways, the magic sauce of this from, I think, a public sector perspective, is that you're safeguarding some of that community investment in your housing market. And as just a tool in the toolbox, it's broken. I used to argue against community land trusts when, you know, our mayor used to be on the board of directors of MakeWorks many years ago. He says, we should look at a community land trust. I'm like, oh, mayor, you know, mayor, it wasn't mayor at the time. Oh, Eric, that's for hot markets. That's for markets like Door County. That's for, you know, markets where prices are just out of reach for the average person. That's not the case here, and we saw that in kind of that chart. But it's been changing. You know, when Jeff's graph showing that median household income family able to afford that median household income home, or median priced home, well, that's assuming there's enough median priced homes for them to buy. That was just the median versus the median, and actually we've been losing supply of homes for those families for years. And so the actual pressure is much higher than what that chart shows. And this tool, from my perspective, is a really critical one for us to explore, and something that we realized, you know, in partnership with the city here a couple of years ago. It's time to get serious about looking at this.
Okay, I want to ask Matt's question. It's a little different way. This is for Will and Cheryl. Why wouldn't we want to do this? You know, what's the downside? And how much money in order to actually, and some of this is probably going to come out at page 2, but how much money we're actually going to have to come up with just to kick it off? So what's the downside? Why wouldn't we want to do this?
Well, I think, and I'm actually going to go back to something that Jeff said earlier, is that we are running as a municipality of what the city of Green Bay can do for its residents. We are running out of tools
Okay.
to help increase and sustain homeownership in our community.
Okay.
This is maybe just something personal, but I feel like this would be shared across the board here. I think it's incumbent upon us as a municipality to make sure that we are turning over every rock and exploring every option out there to help promote homeownership and safe and stable housing for our residents. So I think this is us just doing our due diligence as a community, as a municipality for its residents. As far as cost goes, that's part of phase 2,
Okay.
right? So we have authorized, or already authorized, you know, up to, not to exceed $65,000 for the initial consulting work, and part of phase 2 is just getting, you know, a lot of those governing documents, the structure put together. But as part of this phase 2, we're going to be looking at, okay, well, what kind of investment is this going to need? And I'll defer to Cheryl or even Jeff with his historical, or his experience in looking at what initial investments he's been seeing to this, but I don't want to speak prematurely when at that yet.
You know, the bottom line is we've been doing gap financing for affordable housing ever since I can remember. You know, you ask, is there a downside? I don't think there is. The upside is that we can actually perpetuate it. So we can maintain that affordable housing, and we do it once. We're going to do that gap once on that house, and then it moves forward, right? Might be 10 years, might be 20 years, but it stays affordable.
Does this allow us, like, I couldn't even name all of the different funding mechanisms that we use, right, for various affordable housing. Does this allow us to funnel that into the CLT so it becomes a more focused, as opposed to, hey, there's this program and this program and this program and this, and just allow us to do that, and then, as you say, right, roll those equity investments forward into the future as opposed to one
So
time?
the question is, like, can home funds, for example, like we use home funds for gap now. Can we use it with the CLT?
Even assistance or for construction,
I think we
yes.
could,
Yeah,
right?
answer is yes.
Okay.
So as long as the person's within.
So it does
As long as it
become.
meets the criteria of the home program, which would probably be
Right.
close to the CLT, we have that.
So it does somewhat become a way, this is a little bit stretchy, but for a donor, kind of, there's almost like a matching funds component to it as well, right? Like, hey, I donate $1, but then there's also these things like home funds coming in, and it can make that dollar
Well,
go for.
we have an adopt a home program specifically for the person who wants to donate money to
Yep.
these types of projects.
And
We've done a
this
number of those as well.
could become somewhat of the,
Yep.
okay.
Correct.
Okay.
No, that's okay.
Yeah, just on that, we've had conversations with donors interested in supporting the development of this, either putting up funding to be the subsidy dollars or to help acquire
Yeah.
land or, other things like that. I think it is an excellent opportunity to bring in other community resources to help support the housing issue. And I think the argument against, it's hard. This is hard. This is an advanced level, tool for getting to affordability, but there's so many benefits, all the ones we've been talking about, but the other is, once that house is in trust, it's never gonna be sold to an investor landlord.
Yep.
It's never gonna be, one of those problem houses. It's always gonna have,
Short-term rental.
it's always going to have
Well,
the community overseeing it and making sure it's an asset that's advancing the community's interests, not detracting.
And as opposed to how we are currently subsidizing affordable housing with home dollars, those carry a 15-year period of affordability. So after that 15 years, then it's gone.
And that was a little bit about my question of why. Could be, one is, there are some real dollars there.
Right.
And we don't know that they last for forever, but it could allow us to have a base every year to build on.
So, Jeff, you had a slide of questions, typical questions, early on, and I barreled through the list of them. Could you give us some typical answers to those typical questions?
Certainly. Just get to it on my end here. Were there any that stuck out to you? Depreciating markets, foreclosures, capital improvements?
I'm just maybe a few examples across the list.
Can you get that slide back up, please?
Yeah.
Tax income from properties, Jeff. Like, how is property taxes determined and assessed on these properties?
Yep. In Wisconsin, it happens on a jurisdiction by jurisdiction basis, as I understand it. So each individual land trust is talking with that taxing jurisdiction. I do know that in both Milwaukee and in Madison, the assessors are assessing the properties at the land trust price versus the fair market value in those instances. But it's not guaranteed, and it's done on a jurisdiction by jurisdiction basis.
Is it taxed, is it just a straight tax, or is it a pilot, a payment in lieu of taxes payment?
I missed part of that question, I'm sorry. Is it
I'm
a
sorry,
straight
Jeffrey,
tax?
do the owners make a payment in lieu of taxes then to the municipality, or is it just right on the tax roll, set up that way?
I probably can't answer that question. My understanding is that the homeowner is just being taxed at that lower tax
Okay.
assessed value.
Okay.
It's the same rate, but it's based on the lower value.
So he's
But
not,
it's that's value of the house?
right.
Improvements probably without the land, or?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. What I understood they were doing in Madison was that it wasn't just taking the value of the land out of the deal, it was taking a look at what that effective land trust purchase price was in establishing what that assessed value was for the land trust property.
But they're taxable properties.
In his example of the $350,000 home,
Yeah.
the owner's not paying taxes on a $350,000
Right.
property, they're paying taxes at the 220. That's the goal of these CLTs, to work with local assessors, help them understand how this is a different sort of critter, and then assess and tax accordingly. So it does push down the tax value, but it also makes sure that the tax bill is affordable to the family that's occupying the home.
Yep.
At some point in time, are these properties ever sold, taken off, out of the land trust and sold in themselves as land and building to a private entity? Did that ever happen? In other words, they're taken out, the land is taken out of the land trust with the building and sold a different way?
Land leases.
I'm not aware of
Okay.
any instances. There were a couple of failed CLTs in Minnesota in those early days, and essentially they got sold onto market in those instances. But at least over the last 20 years, I'm not aware of homes being lost to market or being sold off by community land trust. Again, kind of with a community-based or a membership-based organization, if there's a compelling case, let's say that the Green Bay CLT received a donation of a property and it just didn't make sense for it to be a residential property. You know, if you can convince that membership to say, yeah, this is a good idea for us to sell this off, take the proceeds and invest them in another property, it can be done. It's just, there's a higher threshold for being able to do that. You gotta convince a lot of people that it's a good idea.
That's fine. Other questions for Jeff or Noel or anybody else?
I got a couple, Gary.
Oh, great, thanks Kathy.
In listening to this, Noel, and I look back at all the homes that you guys have done over the years, this almost looks like an alternative way to finance, where I think if some of the homes you guys did, two-story single homes selling at $150,000, you would have set them up under a land trust instead, so that you could have kept them affordable and they wouldn't have sold?
I fully expect if we move forward with this plan that you know, a number of homes that we do and a number of homes that Habitat does, particularly if they're built on lots that were once owned by the city, and that the city is going to say, yes, you can you know, have this lot and build a home on it for sale, but it's got to go to the trust. And maybe it's not every single one. I've known some communities where they're doing like every third, you know, or they're doing 3 out of 5, or they're different thresholds. Those are the sorts of conversations I think are part of the phase 2 of this studying. What makes sense? Is it a you know, case by case basis, or you know, what's the priority? Maybe we think about the geographic distribution within the city, but certainly this would apply to, I think, a lot of our single-family new construction in the future, that we just place it in the trust to safeguard that investment and to make sure it performs this way. Again, now that might be you know, something nuanced based on the threshold of income we're serving. As Debbie mentioned earlier, if we're focusing on the 80 to 120% versus the 30 to 50, you know, you might want to have different approaches depending on where you're at or the level of subsidy that might be initially involved. Once it gets to a certain threshold or higher, it's a no question, it's going into the trust, you know, whatever. But those are the sorts of conversations I'm anticipating being ahead of us. But certainly, Kathy, a number of our future developments, if we have a trust in this community, are going to go into the trust.
Yeah, because I see this as this looks like an awesome program to really expand the amount of single homes that are built, single family homes versus apartments and things like that. And I know I heard you, I'm sorry, my phone. I know I heard you say that you went on fleet line land, but I don't know, this sounds really awesome for and being able to expand our single family homes. And it sounds, when I initially read that, I was thinking that you'd buy a large plot of land, but it sounds like it could be any plot of land. Any home, anywhere.
Yes.
And then I wrote the dollars to start, but that's what you're gonna figure out in your second phase. I really, really like this.
Steve, looking at those questions, is there any particular one that you'd like?
Nothing jumping out at me. I guess I'm having trouble understanding the Redevelopment Authority's influence on this, right? Like, whose risk is it, albeit however good it looks? Right, like, it seems like a helpful tool and we seem excited about it and it looks fantastic. Somehow there's risk for someone that is being shared somewhere. Is that what the city is shouldering?
Right, I mean, there's, my understanding, and Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, but when a CLT first starts, the municipality typically plays a larger role in the beginning to get things going. And that's what it looks like here. So whether that's land that is owned by the RDA that we would look at moving into trust, or it's that initial injection of subsidy to help get things moving, I mean, the city of Green Bay is going to need to play an active role in the initial part of getting a CLT up and going.
The land or the gap generally comes through the RDA.
Yeah.
As an entity, it's either our land, you know, you'll see later on in the meeting, we have a number of lots that we could contribute, but also our funding sources.
But that's, despite any of these possible bullet points, it would still be our land.
Yes.
Well, it'd be the trust land.
It'd be the trust.
It's moved into a trust.
Right, but I mean, you know, I think, what is the risk? That's what I'm trying to, you know, what is the worst case scenario? If something went terribly sideways and the land trust didn't work out for a particular
Sure, so we would, I get what you're saying, right, so, like, are you saying, would we look at having like clawbacks, like, should the CLT fail, the city or the Redevelopment Authority would have like right of first refusal on getting the land back,
Sure.
or how do we recapture our investment if it
Reduce the
fails?
risk.
Right, I mean, like, if this is exclusively phase two as an avenue to pursue an understanding of the risk management, that seems pretty reasonable.
Yeah.
Right, I guess I just,
All these legal documents will come out of phase 2, on how the land transfers, what happens with the trust, what happens with those defaults if there's a foreclosure for some reason, or,
Conditions.
right, like what happens in that case.
I like super love the idea of another tool to help with affordable housing, right? I'm
But
just,
let's-
I'm
right, there should be a manner of
what am I
protecting the
actually
asset.
voting on?
Yeah, and we say that the home has to be sold to another income and qualified family.
Right.
It might not be that Fred and Mary are actually marketing their home to other income qualified families. They may actually transact the house, it goes back to the trust remarkets the home. There's, you know, obviously programmatic risks and challenges there.
I mean, it sounds
You know,
like
a house
a-
could get beat up really bad and
Sure.
you've got to deal with it and things like that. But those are factors that we face already. And without the safety net of having that property tied up in a
Yep,
way
yep.
that it stays in the family as a.
Yeah.
Debbie,
One
please.
final thing is that, as you guys were saying, it's like, the city's already providing gap financing for homeownership. And every year, the gap financing gets to be more and more and more.
And that's true.
Right.
And the money you're getting from the feds is kind of not being the same as it was. And so less and less families really are gonna end up being served.
Correct.
So if we can put something that goes in perpetuity, that makes much more sense than the one-time give, call it back, and then working on the funds that way.
Right.
Okay, any
I have
questions?
one last question.
Yeah, please, Kathy.
When somebody comes into the program and they're at 80 to 120%, and let's say in 5 years they're way over, we're not reassessing that anymore.
No,
Only at the initial point.
Right. Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay, any other questions for Jeff or Noel? If not, a motion is back to regular business.
So moved.
Matt
Second.
and Steve, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, we're back to regular business. I just want to make one general comment. The recommendation is that it be run by a nonprofit, NeighborWorks being possibly being one of them. I just want to make sure that we have someone strong on our staff working closely with that. I have a lot of respect for our staff. And I just don't want to be shifted over totally to a nonprofit that's going to run this. I want staff to be heavily involved with that, that's all. Okay?
The mayor's
Yes.
office.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I'm sure
That's
that's
our
what
directive as
Noel
well.
wants as well. I guess.
Yeah, and the mayor's office too, right?
Right, that's
He's gonna
that's
go.
our direction as well. Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion to approve proceeding phase 2.
I'll second that.
Motion by Steve, second by Debbie, to proceed with phase 2 of the community land trust feasibility study. Questions or comments regarding the motion? If not, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Excellent, thank you. Opposed? Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, looking forward to working
Thanks,
with you
Jeff.
on this.
Thanks.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Consideration of possible action to approve the transfer of parcel 21-3380 and 21-3381 from the Redevelopment Authority of the City of Green Bay to the City of Green Bay Parks Department for development of VT Pride Park.
Yep, I will take, excuse me, I'll take that, Gary. So those sites are actually located at 2111 Imperial Lane and 2123 Imperial Lane. Up here, I do have some, this is the GIS that will show where our 2 sites are and how that would be joined with the City of Green Bay sites on there. Parks has requested to have these transferred over for the expansion. Now, this expansion will include 2 soccer fields, volleyball courts, open shelter with bathrooms, a basketball court, a playground area, and a pathway through the site. Parks is also working with a private individual to acquire part of his lot, which would become part of the parking to the park. The transfer of these 2, as you can see, the top part is where they're working with the private individual to get additional space. The transfer of these 2 will help them ensure that the new development of this park, the master plan, would create this entire park. So our staff as a whole, we highly recommend that we are able to transfer these 2 parcels over to the Parks Department for the expansion of the VT Pride Park.
Okay, this is really a silly question. What is VT Pride?
Vern Taylor was a resident in the Imperial Lane Neighborhood Association, was very active. And, yeah.
Killer.
and he was like an neighborhood-
I was like reading this and I'm like, is it Virginia?
Where?
What is
He was a very active neighbor that lived in Imperial Park, Vern Taylor.
Okay. It has passed.
Where are
It
we in
has passed
the
away.
city limits? I'm sorry.
Off of Manitowoc Road,
Okay.
and so it'd be way on the east side.
So this site is at the base of the JBS.
Can you go back to the GIS?
Rock Center,
Yeah, okay.
Imperial,
Yeah.
JBS. We tried to deed these over like 15 years ago. We had these for a long time, but the owner was opposed to it for the same purpose of the park expansion.
Yeah, Corey from Parks is also here, so if there's any questions regarding the concept and the development that's going on, I'm sure she'd be happy to answer questions as well.
I'm not sure that's necessary for me. I don't know about you.
So, good use of land for me.
Yep, I think so too.
Kathy, she agreed? Okay.
Yeah, motion to approve.
Oh, Kathy made a motion to approve.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Debbie. Any questions or comments in regard to the motion? If not, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carried. Excellent. Excellent use of land.
That
Thank
was
you.
awesome.
Number 4, consideration of possible action to not award the KI
Not
West
award.
one of the care contract. But, okay, that's good to have that every once in a while.
All right, so remember I told you about we had that sprinkler break?
Yes.
In our town of
Yes.
KCC. So we actually hired BSA to figure out what caused that break, and as a result, there were some other repairs that needed to be made by us to that area to ensure that it doesn't happen again. So this project was bid out through Public Works, and unfortunately, the bids came back very high on this project. Looking at it again with BSA, we believe, and Trista, I'm not sure if Trista's on the line here or not, but from Public Works, we believe that we could take this out for bid again by retweaking the bidding process by, instead of looking at lump sums, to be more specific in the bidding process.
Good.
So we'd like to actually rebid this
Yes.
out,
Yes.
but we need you to not award this contract as a result
Right,
of that.
makes sense.
I have to abstain from this, it's on my desk personally. So it sounds like my talking points made it to Cheryl, okay. But you say bids, there was only one, it was
Yes.
over 10 times my estimate, and I saw it as a courtesy bid, if anything else. Change in circumstances could go a long way.
Okay.
I would make the motion to approve not awarding the bid for the West Rotunda repairs.
Second.
Okay, a motion and a second, Matt and Kathy. Alderman Hinkes, I'm sorry, I keep saying call you Kathy.
It doesn't, it's okay.
No, I should be calling you Alderman. Alderperson.
Function the same way.
All right. Anyway, the motion and a second. Any questions or comments in regard to the motion? If not, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. We do nothing. There you go.
I I'm not
It's kind of rare for us.
And Lisa, there's abstention.
Okay, good idea. Number 5, consideration of possible action on award to purchase a new train station depot shelter for the Bay Beach Park from Northland Recreation. Good.
Okay, this is in regards to the CDBG allocation that we did in May. We awarded Bay Beach $260,000 worth of CDBG funding for 3 different activities out there. One was for the new depot, train depot shelter, one was for train tracks, and then the other one was for some benches and some umbrellas and things like that. So the Parks Department, along with purchasing, went out for bid, and the bids came back, or the quote came back from Northland Recreation for the train depot shelter in the amount of $92,706.80. So we're asking you to approve the purchase of that shelter so that they can get that purchased and in time for our CDBG spending.
Were there other bidders, or were there more than one people that bid?
I'm going to defer that to Corey.
This is through a Sourcewell contract, which is a co-op purchase, and that, I don't know exactly how it all works, but there's it's like pre-bid almost, where you get discounts and things based on the terms of the contracts that they have with these co-op purchasing companies. So it's it's not your typical RFP type process, I guess.
Understand.
Yes.
Questions, comments?
So this money
The only
comes out of the
question
CDBG?
I would have is that.
Yes, out of the
Train
260,000.
tracks and everything, so that's all gonna fit within that 260?
Correct.
Okay.
All right then.
Older person, Hinkvis. I got it right this time, sorry about that. Any motions?
A motion to approve?
I'll second.
Motion by Alder person Hinkvis, second by Matt. Questions or comments regarding the motion? If not, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carried, thank you.
I'm not sure.
Matt and I looked at the financial report and check register, we had no problem. Anybody else have any questions or comments regarding the check register?
No?
Okay. RDA parcel limit authority, yes, Ron, please.
Okay, so I did summarize what we currently have from the RDA properties that are owned. We currently have 28 that we are actively marketing. Those are the ones that we have listed on our website. We've created a new, what we call a property story map. That is new. People can go on, click on the website, they can find out what zoning, everything is. That is broke down by 15 residential, 10 industrial, and 3 commercial properties. We have 79 parcels that are considered on hold. They're being used in other ways. UW Extension Gardens, parking, shipyard development, rotating art sites, pocket park, community policing center, storage garage includes KI Center, and the trail system. We do have 26 lots that are considered research in progress. Now, some of those include, we've got multiple parcels over in the Gallagher, Emmett, Mary division that we're working on infrastructure over there because it just got taken out of the floodplain, so we have to create some infrastructure over there. So it's just some smaller sites that need further review to move forward. We have 16 parcels that are actually in planning options right now, so they're in the process of being developed.
Good.
Development agreements that are actually shovels in the ground. We have 9 of those, and then we do have 15 parcels that are either leased or currently out for requests for proposals. I've listed those out so you can kind of see who the developers are, what properties are in each of those categories. For the 23-24 year, we had 3 single lots that went to NeighborWorks, 3 single lots that went to Habitat, all which are moving forward. In fact, 2 of them NeighborWorks just completed on Day Street, so if you get a chance to go by the 1162, 1164 Day. I do have, there they are, the Bridges Construction NeighborWorks. They just finished those, in fact, they just had an open house a little over a week ago.
Yeah.
So, City East is the upper left-hand corner, Gorman with Bay City Lofts is on the right-hand side. And then the Jazz House in Lament's construction just completed their 1915 Harold Street.
You never get to see the pictures of the after stuff.
Well, you just get to see them before.
Yeah, that's been my big thing now, is to go out and get after pictures. As soon as I know that they get
Absolutely.
occupancy permits, I've been going out. And some of them are bigger developments, like Jazz House I did that with, City East I'm working on it with, and Bay City Lost is just stages of the construction, so we can see progress of the work we're doing here.
Yeah. You're doing a great job, Robin.
You have it, you should go online and look at that story map. It's really swift. You can actually hover over it, click for available properties, it pulls up the spec sheet for it. So if you're looking like, oh, I want to build in the city of Green Bay somewhere, you can look at that.
Yep.
And see, oh.
It has a map by category. It'll automatically take them to the GIS map, of actual photo of the property. Then we also have it go right into zoning. So if there's any questions regarding conditional use permits or anything like that, we have them directed us where they can find that information.
It's so neat that at Bridges Construction, we're working with the high school students with the construction. Boy, what a neat partnership that is.
Yeah, we have another one that will probably be coming forward next month that NeighborWorks is doing for the new calendar year. So we're pretty excited about working on it. And they do just a great job.
I mean, these properties are like a perfect example of what we're talking about.
With the land trust?
Yeah, because how big are they? 1,200?
They're like 1,200 square feet, yeah.
Okay, and what's the sales price?
But now that
259.
259 to 269 is what we're at right now.
Right?
Yep.
Oh, my Lord.
And that's where we come in with the down payment assistance or.
$60 a square foot that it would be selling for.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I bought the houses on the site many years ago.
It
Yeah.
wasn't that.
It wasn't that.
They were affordable houses then.
Too new and everything, but.
Steve, obviously this is for all of our benefit, this information, but in particular, wanted you to have a little bit of background as far as property
Yeah,
deal.
you had mentioned it, I think, in my first meeting, and super appreciate it. Finally coming up. Thank you. Thank you.
Great job, like always, Brenda. Any questions or comments to the presentation?
No, that's great.
No.
Excellent job, like always, thank you.
You say Gorman did
Bay City Lofts, they're still working on it, but
Festival.
yeah, the one over by University.
Yep.
Festival, yeah.
Airlines.
It's come a long way, I mean, it's moving.
What about Walnut? Is that almost?
That's the city east.
I
It's
feel
really
like they're gonna
close.
be.
They're really
They're
close, in
recent now.
fact, they opened across the street, that building that was always looking a little over.
Yeah.
That got redone and everything, that is their leasing office.
Oh,
And I have noticed that, I think that was a week ago when I was taking these pictures too, that it showed that the leasing office was open. So they are starting to take applications. Our artist got their piece welded and put up, so if you drive by, you'll be able to see what the artist did too.
I saw it, yeah.
Yeah.
Very good. Any other questions for Rhonda? If not, Brownfield program update, Rebecca, you go.
That's
Hey,
me,
Rebecca, how you
the
doing?
new face in the room. For those of you that I haven't met personally, I am Rebecca Finkel. I am the Economic Development Specialist here, about 2 months in. As part of my role here, I do manage the Brownfields program. And I realize that this is the first time that this body is getting an update. So we're all kind of new to it at the same time. So what I would like to do is start out with just a general overview of what the Brownfields program is, what our particular grants are that we're involved with, and then I'll get to the updates on the properties within each of those grants.
So the EDA used to handle this.
Right.
Now it's gonna come to the RDA, and it's actually a requirement from our grant.
Because the EDA is
The EDA.
Correct.
So.
Okay, so the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency manages the Brownfields program, and the purpose is really to provide eligible entities with a mechanism to assess potentially brownfield contaminated properties, and also come up with plans for how to remediate the contamination if there is some, and how to prepare those properties for redevelopment. So as part of that program, the City of Green Bay currently is involved with three of the EPA grants, one being the Brownfield Assessment Grant, one being the Brownfield Cleanup Grant, and one being the Brownfield Revolving Loan Fund. And I'll get into each of those a little bit in the slides ahead. And before I do, I just wanted to also explain that we have another partner in this process because we do retain the services of what's called a Qualified Environmental Professional, QEP. There are a lot of acronyms that go along with the brownfield, so I've been learning a whole new language, so I'll share that with you as well. But our consultant is Stantec Consulting Services, and they conduct the assessments and then manage the remediation activities. Next slide, please, Steph. So,
If it wants to work today. Here we go.
perfect. So as Cheryl just alluded to, there's been a bit of a transition here recently with the role of Brownfields Advisory Committee. It did start originally with the Economic Development Authority. However, with the dissolution of that body, I believe that was earlier this year, this role has transitioned to the RDA. So what that does is really provide a twofold mechanism by which we, staff, myself, are able to update you as well as the community on what we have going on regarding our grant-funded activities, and also soliciting public input, providing opportunity for the public to ask questions or provide their feedback on our cleanup activities as well as our redevelopment projects. Next one. Okay, so that first grant I mentioned, the EPA assessment grant. The time period for that grant is fiscal year 2023 to 2026. It's a $500,000 grant, of which we've spent about 7% so far. So we're just kind of getting started with this grant, being the $34,000, roughly over $34,000 that we've been invoiced thus far. It's a community-wide assessment grant, so we are able to use it on potentially contaminated properties throughout the community. However, I'll jump down to the bottom of this slide. There are 4 identified high-priority brownfield site corridors, being Broadway, Shipyard, Belp Avenue, and University Avenue. So the EPA assessment grants provide the opportunity to conduct phase 1 assessments, which are, I don't know if you are familiar, but it's more of an overview or a preliminary site assessment to determine the likelihood that there are contaminants on the site. So it might be previous uses, it might be suspected contaminants, it might be current conditions, it might be proximity to known contaminated sites that might potentially have spilled over. But it's doing that initial preliminary assessment to then determine if we should go to a phase 2. And then phase 2 is more of a quantitative assessment, I would say, or a study of what are the contaminants that are actually on the site and in what levels, and what would have to be done to remediate them, as well as some other surveys for hazardous materials, petroleum, asbestos, and the like. So far, again, with this grant starting, I believe it was the end of 2023 map,
Yeah.
right? We have assessed 3 sites, being, and they're kind of on the map here, 1341 State Street, with, it's the red, kind of down in the lower left quadrant, 1400 Main Street over on the right, thank you, Steph, and then the public market parcels in purple. And then if you could go to the next slide. Okay, so where we're at right now with this project, again, we received the grant toward the fall of 2023, so that first quarter was used to conduct the RFP, again, to procure Stantec's services as our QEP, and then also to complete the quality assurance project plan. And then in parentheses, I have the dollar amounts. Those are the activities that we've actually been invoiced for in that account for that $34,000 I mentioned earlier. So then to break down the 3 different sites that I just pointed out, the 1341 State Street is the Green Bay Drop Forge site. So at that location, we have completed a Phase 1 ESA. We have not yet been invoiced for that. I will say I got to attend the site assessment, which was a great learning experience for me to see kind of what is Stantec looking for when they walk through, when they conduct that assessment, as well as the drop forage process itself was very interesting. So happy to have been able to participate in that. Second property being 1400 Main Street. That one is at the intersection of Main and I believe it's Baird.
Oh, yeah, great structure. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
We've also completed a Phase 1 there. We've been billed roughly 7,400, and we have EPA approval to complete Phase 2, which we'll look to do here shortly. And then the public market parcels, we've also completed that Phase 1 for roughly 12,500. We've also had a hazardous materials assessment conducted for asbestos, lead-based paint, and restricted waste for 11,300. And then we are going to be proceeding with the next steps for that project as well. Next one. Okay, and then the second grant we work with currently is the EPA cleanup grant. This is specifically for the former Badger Sheet Metal site, which includes the 2 parcels on South Broadway, 421 Arndt, and 419 South Maple Street, which I've highlighted there in red. This grant as well is fiscal year 2023 to 2026. This one is $1 million grant. It's a little bit more than the previous one, and we have not spent any of our budget yet, but we anticipate that happening very quickly as activity is ramping up on this project. This grant is specifically to clean up petroleum, the contaminated soil, groundwater, and address some vapor intrusion concerns that are associated to the prior use of this site. And again, that goal is to conduct the remediation activities and prepare this site for redevelopment.
So right now, we have no idea how contaminated it is.
Oh, yes.
Oh,
we
we
do.
do? Oh, we do?
Through the supplemental investigation, we know how contaminated it is.
Okay.
We've got a general remedial action plan at this point. That's how we got the cleanup grant. We just have a little bit more work to do. As you're aware, we've recently started working with General Capital Group on a plan to redevelop the site with a fire station and some housing above. And we're working on those site plans, so as those get closer to being real, we can actually start spending down on these grant dollars to start a contamination.
They can't do that until it's done.
Yep.
And so a little bit of this, you do the Phase 1 and then Phase 1, you're just kind of looking at what's the history of the use, how was it, what might be here.
Yep.
Phase 2, do some actual testing, find out what's there, what levels.
Sometimes.
Now we go back to EPA and say, can we get a grant to clean this up?
Yep.
Okay. Maybe after Phase 2, right, like, okay, no sweat, no problem, we're okay. Got it. Good.
Exactly. So that basically covers this slide. So thank you, Matt, for doing that. I guess the only other thing to mention is that we will be looking to demo the existing buildings there. Of course, with the proper abatement of asbestos, lead-based paint, and regulated waste. And then finally is our revolving loan fund. Yep, if you could bring it up.
That one?
This one, yep. Okay, so this program is a little bit different. This one is actually a sub-granting and loan program whereby the city then could provide funding to owners or developers to clean up and prepare their sites for redevelopment. The project period is 2020 to 2025. We were awarded $800,000 for this grant, and that's kind of broken down by $720,000 being earmarked for loans, $77,000 for sub-grants, and then $3,000 for travel. There is a National Brownfields Conference, which I believe is every other year.
Sort of, yeah.
Oh my God, that
whenever they want
sounds
to.
so fun.
As far as this
My
program.
property is worse than your property.
What are you, like trading cards or something?
We have had no loans or sub-grants applied for to date with this program. We do have kind of all of our ducks in a row as far as the policies, procedures, loan agreements, all of those templates are prepared. So when we do get the right person in there, we'll be able to get that moving pretty quickly. And then we do continue to market on the city's website when we speak to developers. Any way possible, we're always going to be on the lookout for any potential projects that might fall within the parameters of this program. And we do hope to have a couple here with our projects on the horizon that would be able to qualify.
And this revolving loan fund, like I'm familiar with the ones we do, like community development revolving loan fund, we help businesses kind of get going. We're providing mezzanine financing, but a really attractive rate. Is this the same? Is it on top of just a regular, loan amount that comes in, or why would a business do this one?
Right. Primarily it'll be developers that come in and apply for these funds. We were hoping that the developer for 200 North Monroe, we recently terminated that development agreement, you remember. We were hoping that they were going to be our first applicant for this program. We were also hoping that the former developers we were working with for Badger Sheet Metal were going to apply for this as well. Unfortunately, both those projects fell through. But they would apply, the idea is they'll apply for these loans. It would actually go through the RLF committee, the same one that already exists today. Yep.
Got it.
So with that, those are the updates to date. I will be providing updates regularly to this body as well. It is part of the guidelines and requirements for the grant that we do have updates done and available to the public as well.
Excellent. Very
Nice job.
Very nice.
Thank you.
Very nice job. Any other questions? If not, thank you.
You're welcome.
Excellent update. Director's report, Cheryl.
Yeah, we've attached our update. I can tell you the JBS project is going to finance. We've got the 4 bids that came back on that project. It's going to finance and council by the end of July, so we're excited about that one, actually getting some shovels in the ground. The Monroe and Chicago site and also the 200 North Monroe site are out for RFP now. Those are due back at the end of August. Good. So those come back in September. Good. Depending, September, maybe October, depending on hopefully we get so many of them, it's going to take us a while.
There you go. Yes, let's hope so.
To get that all out. Continuing to work with Peter Nugent and the Cherry Street property. He's still working through his numbers on that. We just got some stuff back today. Actually, we'll have 5 minutes to do that. And then, anything else? Matt? Just proceeding on.
That report is very helpful.
I love this report.
Really appreciate that. Absolutely.
Any questions for me?
No.
Looks good, Jeremy.
Maybe next meeting or whenever it's appropriate, we don't want to create additional work with the Deanna, with the TD.
I think when we come back.
Is Diana the third?
Yeah, we actually have a meeting, and is it the next RDA meeting?
Yeah, so we are creating at least 3 new TIF districts this year.
Yeah.
And we'll be bringing that to RDA for your initial approval in August. And so it's appropriate for that same meeting for Diana to come give an overview of all the other districts that are already established, how they're doing.
Absolutely.
Answer any questions.
Excellent. Maybe she could also give us a bond report, in particular those that are tied to the RDA. Just for everybody's information, against Steve, et cetera.
Yeah.
That we're aware of the bonds that we created, are outstanding. Jeff, downtown, Main Street.
I don't really have a great deal to report. I did speak yesterday with a developer who purchased the old former Brecca and Joanni's Law Building. You might recognize that across the street from the Cathedral. And that is in the process of being redeveloped in 1- and 2-bedroom apartments, investing significantly in the property, and should be completed in a few weeks.
That's the one that says luxury apartment?
Correct.
Got it. Okay.
Yes. 1- and 2-bedroom apartments, very nice fixtures and appointments, and should be, and already has initial leases being signed and interest in that site, so. I've also noticed significant redevelopment taking place in the Quality Inn and Suites in their former Astor Room that is all
Oh, right.
refurbished and in like new condition. And a restaurant called Latin Flavors hopes to be opening there soon, but facade work has been underway there for the past few weeks. That is a property that has been in disrepair, that corner for many, many years. It's part of the Packers Heritage Trail, and I think people will be very delighted when they see the improvements, full brand-new commercial kitchen and a nice restaurant about to open.
Oh, fantastic.
That's awesome.
Hey, sir, is Leah on board? I don't think so. So, either is Brooke probably, right? Brooke aboard?
She was, but
Oh,
she's not on anymore.
If not, our next meeting is August 13th. And I'll entertain any questions or comments that are raised, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Debbie and Steve, all in favor, saying aye?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carried. Thanks, all the persons. I'll get right on, Yeah, very nice. This is progress again. Very cool. Not deep things going on, sure.